So in the second part of Music Theory from Scratch, you can see if you look at the top of your screen, there's a row of letters that I've handwritten onto a piece of paper. That same little piece of paper is sellotaped to the piano here, where the black letters that you can see, which are the natural notes here, the white keys of the piano, line up exactly with this piece of paper. Now between those black letters we also have, we've got a coloured letter, a red one, and then a blue one underneath. So looking at the first one, the top left of your screen, you have your C, which is this note. And then if you look at the black note to the right of it, we have a red C with like a hashtag symbol next to it, superscript. So the hashtag symbol sits sort of diagonally above the letter. This is C sharp. So a sharp is the hashtag. Looking directly below C sharp, we have a blue letter, we've got a D, and then next to it we've got a lowercase b. Now this is flat, so lowercase b, it's actually a lowercase b with a slight pointed bottom to it, but a lowercase b is absolutely fine. Now this is D flat. So as before in part 1, C sharp and D flat are exactly the same key on the piano, exactly the same note. So D sharp and E flat are the same, F sharp and G flat, etc. All of the black notes can be called two different things. Now, this piece of paper could extend the entire length of the piano because as you can see, the pattern repeats itself. C and C sharp. And if we go along the letters along the piece of paper to the next C, we've got C and C sharp there as well. Now's the time to introduce the musical stave, because letters are all very fine, but how do you tell the difference between this C and this C if all that is written on the page is a letter C? It doesn't tell you where to play it. And that's where the musical stave comes in. Now, looking just below this row of letters on your screen now, you will see 5 lines with a squiggle at the beginning. Now that is called a treble clef. Don't worry too much about that at the moment. It's a sort of classic musical symbol and you probably find it under a list of emojis on your phone. Now what this means is it's sort of these notes on the top half of the piano, or notes that are higher up the stave. There is another one for the lower half, which we'll go through in a minute. Now, if I play this C again, above on your screen, you will see that there is now a note there, which is a black blob that's sort of hanging just below your 5 lines. And through that blob is a line, so it looks a bit like a planet. It looks a bit like Saturn. That is C. That is middle C. Now this refers to the fact that this C is in the middle of the piano. Now if I look to the next C, as you can see now on your page, on the stave above, that C is now the 3rd space up on your stave. Now if we look at the other spaces, this is a good way of memorising your notes, memorising where they are. We have the C here. If I play this F, that is the 1st space that you can see on your screen now. If I go to A, that is the 2nd space. C was on the 3rd space, and E was on the 4th space, on the top space. So in between these F, A and C and E on the piano, you have the other natural notes which fall on the lines of the stave. So if I have F and A, between those is G. So you can see that there's a note that is on the 2nd line up. B is on the middle line, D is on the next line, and then F sits on the top line. on the bottom line is E. The space below that is D. So you can see that all of the notes are now laid out. So if I now put all of those notes that I've just played, which represent this entire piece of paper, you can see those on the stave ranging from C, which is the bottom one, which had the blob with the line through, all the way to the A up here, that is a blob with a line through, but this time sitting the other side of the stave, sitting on the top. So we've got that complete range of notes. Now, if you can read those, essentially you're done, really. If there are higher notes, and I know orchestral musicians who still count up, if there's a note right at the top, it's kind of a, oh, which one's A? So notes like that are less common, sometimes, even a seasoned musician will have to go, oh, what's that? Oh, So that is basically your useful range of notes from C to A. Now, before I go on to bass clef, because actually bass clef is a very similar thing, it's important at this stage to start thinking about rhythm, because what the music stave shows you is not only where the notes are, but also shows you how long each note is. Now, for that, I'm going to need something called a metronome. So I'm just going to get a metronome on my phone here. So let's set a tempo of 100 beats per minute. Now that is a constant beat. All music goes to a beat. All sort of pop music at any rate. Classical music is slightly more fluid, but it still has a time sort of bass, like pulse. So if I now play the metronome on my phone here, I'm going to play, as you can see on the stave, the notes will change ever so slightly in appearance. Now I'm going to use, let's take the A here. So I'm going to play notes that go in time with the beat. Now these notes are called crotches, and sometimes also known as quarter notes. Now I quite like the whole quarter note thing, or eighth notes or 16ths or whatever, because it does make a bit more sense, especially if you're using a computer. If you're doing computer music, for example, it makes much more sense. So I'm going to play alongside the tempo on here, and you can hear what happens. Now, on the stave, as you can see, all of the notes look the same. They're all a black blob with a stalk coming off. Now that represents a note every single beat. Now I'm going to play the metronome again, but this time I'm going to play notes every 2 beats. So these are going to be twice as long, and you can see the difference on the stave. And there we are, you can see those on the stave. Now if I play a note that is 4 beats long, you can see that there's a sort of a rather drastic change. This time the note has no stalk at all, it's just an empty circle on its own on the music. So there is no stalk to say that it's any faster. Now that's 4 beats, or called a whole note. So you've got a whole note or 4 beats. Now most music is in 4/4 time, most pop music that you find. So that's actually at the beginning of the stave, you can see that there are 2 4s. Just after the treble clef there's a 4 and then a 4 written beneath it. That means that there are 4 beats in a bar, and the Americans call it a measure. Now it's exactly the same thing, it's simply the vertical lines on the music which help to divide the music up into chunks of time. Now, just going forward, if we had beats before which were quarter notes. If I now play 2 per beat, these are twice as quick, you can see what happens on the stave. So we've got eighth notes or quavers. And if I go twice as fast again, it's going to take a bit of a repeat on the piano, but you can hear it. I got there in the end. Now these are called semiquavers or 16th notes. You can get 32nd notes and 64ths, but frankly, it's the same idea. And in fact, if you look above the stave, you'll see 32nd notes written out. Now what happens with these, every time you go quicker and quicker, you get an extra bar which links all of your notes, an extra sort of a tag that goes across and joins all of the notes, that sort of thicker black line. Now also, you can get notes that are halfway between these. Now if I, for example, play half notes, you can see on the stave there are 4 notes, equal length, which are circles with the stalk coming off. And if I was to play 3 beats, there are actually 2 ways of writing it. You could have a half note and a quarter note joined together with a little smiley face called a tie. 1, 2, 3, like that. Or you can have a half note with a little dot next to it. They mean exactly the same thing. So you can also see on the stave, after the note was a sort of a rather jagged looking 3. Now that's called a rest. So every bar of 4 that I have, 4 beats, if the notes aren't playing, there are going to be silences instead, and those silences can be written out in exactly the same way. So if I start playing, I'm going to play quarter notes now, and then in the next bar will be shown the equivalent rests. Rest, 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 rest. Now if I do that with half notes, rest, rest. Now with the whole note, note, and then the equivalent rest. There we go, sorry about that. And then quavers, or 8th notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you had your rests there. And then the 16th notes are the same way. You can see that written above. So there are your notes and rests. So what's going to happen in the next video is I'm going to show you a tune that's written out with both notes and rhythm, and then you can try and follow that.